Learn it live.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Latka. We'd like to say good afternoon to our public. Welcome back, trustees and administration from our summer break. And I hope everyone had a relaxing summer break and are all rejuvenated to see what the fall brings us. To start this meeting now, and we have the opening prayer on. I would like Trustee Trustee Don Miller to lead us in prayer. Yeah, Don Miller, please. So you have it ready?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God, the source of every good gift, you have called us together for the first board meeting of the 2022-23 school year as servants to do your will. Grant us the light of your spirit to guide us in our responsibilities as school trustees and administrative staff. May we work together in harmony for the common good. May we listen to one another in a spirit of genuine respect. May we encourage and reverence one another's unique talents. May we use the gifts of the Spirit in creative Christian leadership. May we approach our decision-making through discernment and prayer. May we respond effectively to the needs of the children in our care. God of love, you give us the gifts of the Holy Spirit for the common good. May your blessings radiate from us to others in a new spirit of service. We ask this through Jesus Christ, the light of the word. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. And I would like to do our treaty acknowledgements. We are a party to Treaty 6, and as such, we wish to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is Treaty 6 territory and a traditional meeting ground for many indigenous peoples. We recognize the diversity of the nations who have at one time lived across the territory, as well as the presence of the Métis Nation. Mr. Bouchard, do you have any public forum request?
No.
Thank you. Go to the approval of our agenda. Any additions? Thank you, Mr. Lena. What do you have?
If I could have the following added to 6.5, that the board authorize the following locally developed courses and the resources required to teach them. Learning strategies 15, 25, and 35 for 3 and 5 credits, acquired with permission from the Calgary Roman Catholic Separate School Division for a maximum of 4 years from September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2026. And 6.6, that the board authorize the following locally developed course and the resources required to teach it. Ceramics, Advanced Technologies, 2019, 25 for 5 credits, acquired with permission from the Edmonton School Division for a maximum of 1 year from September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023.
Thank you, President. See no deletions. You have something to add, Mr.
Mr. Chair, I believe there is an addition from the Finance Committee.
From Finance Committee. Okay.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to Finance Committee under 7.1. No, sorry, that's reports. Business, where should I?
6.7.
6.7.
Under action items.
6.7. Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah,
That would be facility improvements through energy efficiencies.
Okay. Facility improvements. you. Any further additions? I'll ask for the motion to be additional to the agenda as. Okay, go ahead, President.
I move that the board approve the agenda as amended.
Thank you. Any discussion? See none. I'll call for the question. All in favor? Carried. None. Thank you. Move to 2.1. Approval of the minutes. We have 2 minutes to approve here, our regular meeting and our organizational meeting. As for the motion to approve the regular meeting held June 2022. Okay, trustee Sarah, yeah.
I move that the regular board meeting minutes be approved June 22.
Thank you. Trustee Sarah. Any discussions? I see none. Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Now, President Marco, you can do the organization.
Make the motion that the board approve the minutes of the organizational meeting held June 22, 2022 as circulated.
Any errors or omission on that minute? See none. Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item number 3, our board goals and priorities for your familiarization as always. All right. We go to item number 4, our executive and administrative reports. Co-chair reports as attached. Any comment or question? Go ahead.
Your item on the mental health in schools. Can you explain a little bit more about what that initiative is?
Okay. I did forward an email. There was a 10 million set aside by the government, and that proposals came in for outfits and organizations and to see what they can do in that regard. And that is for a pilot project. So you have to formulate your proposals and how wide and scope you can support with the mental health initiatives within school jurisdictions. And I believe, to my understanding, that is what government is trying to support with coming out of the COVID. So I'm not sure if Mr. Bouchard have any more insight about that initiative as the
Assistant Superintendent Cardinal is meeting or has met with her team.
Will meet.
Will meet, and they're reviewing the proposal and seeing if it fits into our work and whether we're going to submit a proposal or not. No decision has been made on that yet.
Thank you. So this is a very big initiative coming out of the COVID. So hopefully we get the help that we need for our students and families. Thank you. All right, there are no further questions. We'll go to superintendent report. Okay, all right, go ahead.
Thank you. Number 5, the second bullet, I'm just wondering, it mentions met with 3 other provincial leaders. I'm just what leaders? Oh, like topic leaders or?
Yes, they were
from other school divisions. So there was Christina Hoover from Golden Hills and Andrea Halovka from Calgary Board of Education, as well as Danica Martin from Wolf Creek. Thank you. I appreciate the names, but I just wanted to make sure that it was what the leaders meant in there. The fifth bullet under the same item. Analyzed admin survey results to plan for professional development. I'm just wondering if there was any gaps of note or items of note or things that were really prevalent throughout.
I wouldn't say there are any gaps. So every year in June, we survey the school principals and vice principals to see what they would like as topics for their learning sessions at the admin meetings for the upcoming year. So there's nothing there that I would like to highlight at this time, but we spend between 1 and 2 hours per meeting on learning items. So that's what that's referring to.
Okay,
I was just wondering, who is the new parish priest at St. Michael's?
Father Matthew, he's not really new anymore though.
Oh, new parish priest.
it's not new anymore. Okay, all right. Oh, Mr. Bouchard, what's the new update around MEX? I know during our last meeting, there was some few, and you said you touched base and connected with the new superintendent.
Right, so the new superintendent for Musqueam is Tracy, and her last name is escaping me this second. But I sat down with her in Calgary and we had a good chat about, connecting and reaching out to each other. But she's excited to be in her new role. She's excited also that Brian Wildcat is still there to provide mentorship, she mentioned. So yeah, just making that connection with her.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? So MES were invited by CAS to be at the table.
MES, the superintendents in MES are part of CAS.
Okay. Wonderful. Yeah, good to know. Thank you. All right, if there are no further comments or questions, we'll go to Secretary Treasurer's reports. Hopefully we have money. Okay, any question or comments for Saraka? So, Mr. Leka, just my question with the joint use. What's the updates within all of our communities?
It's been surprisingly quiet from many of the communities. I've been working quite closely, I think, with the city of Lacombe. We've got a draft that's been discussed. I haven't had a follow-up for kind of specific language as we kind of discussed the draft. But I expect that one will proceed kind of to the board rather quickly. With regards to other municipalities, they've been surprisingly silent in terms of the formation or meeting the deadline for next June. So I'm expecting a rush, but I haven't been doing follow-ups over the summer months. It was kind of difficult to kind of reach everybody. And even working with the city of Lacombe, I think they were struggling to, they are looking for a tripartite agreement with Wolf Creek as well. But in terms of coordinating with all three parties, they were having some difficulties because school boards being kind of, for the most part, shut down during the summer months. But the other communities have been silent, so this fall that will probably be in thrust of my kind of follow-ups with all of these and where we at, how quickly we're meeting these.
Right. So let us know if there's any of the communities that this kind of.
Yeah.
Talk to the counterparts in politics, and then we'll go forward. Thank you. Okay, any other comments or questions for Kip? We will move forward. We'll go to business items, number 5. So, board faith plan. Okay. So, when we got off in June, we didn't have a set plan. So I'm proposing to see what we would like to do for our faith plan coming forward every month. Any thoughts? Last year we did part of the Legio, and then we did the sessions under the Disciples of the Word with so do we want to continue on the same? Being mindful of the governance package we have, I'm thinking there'll be some reading towards that. That's what the way I'm envisioning our faith plan next year here. Unless anybody have other thoughts? Any other thoughts? All right. Okay, Mr. Bishop will plan the faith plan around the issue and having Clara support us in between. Thank you. All right. Okay, 5.2, Mr. Bouchard.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So a number of activities happen in schools over the years where they have raised monies to support the Sacred Heart Church of the First Peoples that burned down in Edmonton. So for example, some of our schools, when they sold orange shirts for September 30th, part of that donation went to this initiative, as well as activities on Indigenous Peoples Day in June. So I'm happy to report that we've raised as a division $2,893 to be donated to the church, which hopefully will be presented to them on September 13th. So I share that with the board as a good news story.
Yeah, it is.
Very good.
Yeah, and this is the second initiative we've done for collecting support for that church. We did that last year as well. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, let's hear the good and bad of Beaumont High School.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm happy to report that the City of Beaumont has provided us with a letter documenting that both sites, the standalone site and the joint site with Black Gold, will be serviced should the province announce a capital project. So unless I'm wrong, and Mr. Latka can correct me, but that is the last component that we need to fulfill our obligations under our capital plan submission. So I believe we've checked all the boxes. Is that correct, Mr. Latka? Yeah. So now it's a matter of meeting with infrastructure administration and working to advance that project, and then politically with the minister and her department to advance that project. But the letter was a real key important piece that we're happy to say has been met. As you know, servicing the land in Beaumont has been the biggest challenge for the last 3 years. So to have that commitment by the city and the developer took a lot of work. I know the board advocated strongly for that, so thank you for that. But I'm happy to report that we're there finally. So it's a good news story as well.
Thank you, and this is 2023. Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to commend our superintendent for his ongoing work and commitment to this project and to we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Any further comments? So there will be some further discussions as we move forward, right? We've checked all the boxes. Now we have to move on to political advocacy to make sure this capital project get on the pen and paper somewhere, somehow. Okay, thank you. We will go to 5.4. Trustee Miller, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just an overview of the self-evaluation and what we've done to date and where we will be moving forward with it in the future. So the committee was struck And we had 2 meetings, one to gather feedback and discuss options, and the second one to solidify that with the facilitator. So the second committee meeting happened on August 15th with the facilitator, Mr. Henderson, and everything that the board had requested, that was outlined in an email requesting the feedback, has been implemented into part of the survey. So we will be reviewing a faith component, evaluating committee work, evaluating the positive path forward, evaluating the orientation process, discussing our accomplishments. Those are kind of the high level items that we're going to be a little bit different, and looking at the information from meetings will also be evaluated along with readiness for governance improvement survey. So that has all been compiled and reviewed and approved, and that will be coming out to you tomorrow. We'll have a September 2nd deadline to finish the evaluation digitally, and then we will compile that information, send it out to you before the actual evaluation day, where we will go over the results of everything, and then we will have a third step to that process on October 14th of actually setting our new priorities based on the results from the compilation of the surveys and discussion.
Okay, thank you. Any comments? Go ahead.
I just add to that, in regards to the survey, it will ask you to fill in your name. However, none of your results will be shared. The reason for that is just to ensure that all trustees have had a voice in the survey. So just know that when it asks for your name, the board won't see anybody's personal comments. It will all be compiled and sent out. So just if you come across that and wonder why it's asking for your name, it's just to ensure that every board member has completed it.
Thank you. No further comments. Move forward on the action items. 6.1, we have a request before us. To retreat. So I will ask for someone to make that motion for us, please. Okay, go ahead.
That the board give approval to Christ the King School's request for the grade 9 students to travel to Victoria, BC from April 27th to April 30th, 2023 as presented. It is understood that the board assumes no financial liability to the students and or their parents / guardians should the board cancel an approved trip.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go into discussions and comments now. Question to admin, myself. I see no hands, I see no comments. Call the question. All in favor? Approving this trip. Okay, thank you. Carried. Looks like the pandemic is over and people want to fly away. So there's another request before us, 6.2, going to far away as Japan and Korea. Will I ask for someone to make a motion, please?
I move that the board give approval in principle to St. Augustine School International Travel Request to Japan and South Korea during spring break 2024 as presented. It is understood that the board assumes no financial liability to students and or their parents, guardians, should the board cancel an approved student trip.
Thank you. That's a lot. Okay. Open it up for discussion. Any Question or comments? So, Mr. Bouchard, there, is this like just grade 9 and 12, just a school group?
So it's open to any students in high school who wish to attend the trip.
So, open to the school. Okay, that is wide open. Okay. Is there any support or fundraising?
So the trip is solely supported by individual funds. There's no school fundraising involved.
And then the ratio of adult supervision will be there, depending the number that is landed on.
That's correct.
This is far away. Right, any other questions, comments? All right, I'll call the question now. All in favor of this trip? All right, thank you. It's carried. Six point three. We've seen the background there. Can I have someone make the motion? Okay, go ahead, Trustee Lemon.
I move that the board approve a $30 credit towards the purchase of branded items for all staff and trustees in the division up to $13,500 for the 2022-23 school year.
Thank you. Any questions, comments? So this has been a tradition, just to support and promote our own branding. Unless you have a kind of promotion is very good for any division or any business. So, okay, I see the hand up there. Right. All in favor? Okay, carried unanimously. Thank you. 6.4. I'll defer that to Mr. Banker, please.
Wish to have the background before the motion.
I was assuming, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, give us a quick.
So with regards to the audit committee, two things. One is the term for the two public members will expire on September 16th. So the board has a decision to make whether to extend the terms of either or both of those members, or if they wish to pursue advertising. In advance of the meeting, I reached out to our two public members. Lauren Midland graciously indicated that she is unable to commit the time to the audit committee moving forward and wish to have her name removed from consideration, and therefore the board would be open to soliciting for a replacement for her position as a public member of that committee. Reaching out to Mr. Berube, he indicated he would be willing to let his name stand if the board so chooses to extend his term for another 2 years. Under your policy and under the committee structure, the board can extend any of those committee members for a further 2 years from that. And with regards to Ms. Neblin's wish to step down, she has indicated she would continue and remain on the committee until a replacement to fill her position has been selected and determined. But the process for selection of public members on the last time was done, the advertising was done by the finance committee in terms of the language of the advertisement moving forward. The applications that were received, the audit committee at that time was essentially all trustees. So it was viewed as a committee of all trustees. So the selection of the final membership was done by the board as a whole. So that responsibility was never assigned or included in terms of reference for the audit committee to do that selection. So what I've recommended is two things. One, if the board so wishes, that one, Mr. Ruby be reappointed as a member of the audit committee as per board policy 8. The second one is that the board direct the audit committee to solicit and recommend the candidates, do the selection process by the audit committee. So they would select the candidate or candidates to the board to serve as the public member to the audit committee. So those are the two decisions, whether you wish to continue or extend Mr. Ruby's appointment. The second one is the solicitation and selection of a committee, a public committee member or members if there are two members that will be required. That's the background. So how does the board wish to proceed with regards to those two items?
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the board direct the audit committee to solicit and recommend a candidate or candidates to the board to serve as public member of the audit committee.
So that's a motion. Okay.
John is making it for the second part, not for Mr. Ruby.
Yeah, so that's what she's doing.
Oh,
So let's, yeah, so just hang on to that thought
Okay.
and then let's deal with the first potential, second potential motion. Okay, hold on there. You making a second motion for?
No, I was just going to ask if I could add context to my motion, but
Oh, okay. Okay, let's go into that. So there's a motion on the floor. Okay. See no further hands there, okay. Okay, go ahead.
so the reason that I chose that motion to put forward in front of the board is that just out of fairness, it should become a standard process that we just go through this every 2 years. And the previous volunteer community members were fantastic. And anybody that would like to continue in that role, I think would be welcome to reapply or put the name forward or be considered as a candidate. It's just out of fairness in anything we do, if that becomes a standard in this type of item where we are recruiting that, then that's how it is, rather than giving some preference to someone over anybody else who might be new to the community and want to provide their volunteer time to the board and its work.
Okay, Mr. Lynn, I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I guess just a point of clarification, if we went with the first motion, what would be the process of filling the second position?
Would be the same to advertise and then solicit.
Advertising through the board as a whole or audit committees?
The motion on the floor stands alone. Whether there's an extension of Mr. Ruby considered, or if there is, the board determines that it's not going to extend it. With the motion, as worded, is intended that the audit committee do the solicitation and recommendation of the new committee member or members to the board of trustees for appointment.
Okay, is that clear? That's the discussion there, and there's a motion on the floor. Okay, please, I saw your hands up.
yes, Mr. Chair, I would like to, since we are allowed to reappoint Camille Ruby, I would like to see us reappoint him for 2 years.
So that is first motion.
Yeah.
Okay, hold on here, hold on, yeah. There's one motion on there, okay, so let's deal with that first. See your hand up, give me your question, Michael? Go ahead.
So the motion that's on the floor right now is not necessarily against Mr. Berube, if I'm not mistaken.
No, it's not.
We would still consult
Mhm.
the potential of having him
Yes,
fill that position. It's just allowing audit to, I guess, do an extensive review and vetting of other candidates too.
You still have a position to fill. The
Yeah.
question is
one or two.
dealing with the second issue of a reappointment is whether you're we're filling one or two positions. But this empowers the audit committee to do that because it's not in their terms of reference.
So any further comments here? All right, so I'll call the question for the first, for the second motion there that the audit committee have the mandate, so that doesn't preclude audit committee not looking at anybody else who's already there already. Okay, thank you. So if I may, all in favor of the motion? Okay, that audit committee, thank you, and that is carried. Okay. All right. The committee reports, no, one on there.
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Oh,
If you could go back to the other part
Oh,
of this item with regards to whether the board wishes to reappoint or let Mr. Ruby's appointment expire.
okay. All right, so let's go to the first motion about Mr. Ruby's appointment. Okay. Someone wish to make us that motion? Okay.
I move that the board reappoint Mr. Barubi as a public member of the audit committee as per board policy 8.
Thank you. I'll open it up for discussion now. Any discussion? Okay, let's see now. Okay, we'll call a question to reappoint Mr. Barubi to continue with us for the next 2 weeks. Okay, all in favor? Okay, 3 for myself, I'll vote for, so that is carried. All right, so we'll then move to 6.5. 6.5, that was the motion. The locally developed courses. Okay, there you go. Thank you. Would I have someone? Okay, Mr. Len, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I move that the board authorize the following locally developed courses and the resources required to teach them. Learning strategies 15, 25, and 35 for 3 and 5 credits required with permission from the Calgary Roman Catholic Separate School Division for a maximum of 4 years from September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2026.
Thank you. Okay, yeah, go ahead.
What exactly is learning strategies? I'm not opposed to it, I just
Okay,
need
let me
some
start.
context as to what those courses are.
Yeah, I'll defer back to the 2 angels.
Yes, so learning strategies essentially is to help students with study skills, with any kinds of strategies essentially to help them be successful learners.
Thank you.
All right. So we call the question then, all in favor? Thank you, carried. And the second half of that, 6.6. Can I have someone make that motion? Okay, oh, yeah, go ahead.
That the board authorize the following locally developed course and the resources required to teach them: ceramics advanced techniques 2019 for 5 credits, acquired with permission from the Edmonton School Division for a maximum of 1 year from September 1st, 2022 to August 31st, 2023.
Thank you. Any comments or? Okay, yeah, go ahead, trustee.
Just a note, why only maximum of 1 year? Is it a pilot? Is it a trial?
I'll defer back to
So courses are approved only for a certain amount of time by the province. And so we're just catching the tail end. What'll happen is that they will renew the course most likely, and then we have to go through this process.
Okay.
All right. You. Any other comments, question? Question? Okay. All right, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, carried. Unanimously, thank you. So 6.7. Finance, facility, energy efficiency. Okay. Thank you. So Mr. Laka is circulation backgrounder. Yes, for sure, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the Finance Committee just recently had a committee meeting where this initiative was brought to our attention, and we discussed it in thorough detail, as much as we could. And some information has just been handed out to in regards to the topic of the facility improvements through energy efficiencies. So at this point, I will hand it over to Mr. Latka to explain further.
Right, thank you, Trustee Miller. So administration brought to the Finance Committee a preliminary proposal that involves looking at our costs of our operations in terms of our school facilities and trying to look at some way that we can reduce the amount we're transferring from the instructional block and support facilities. One of the key areas that administration we've identified is that we planning to spend next year about 25% of our operations maintenance budget on utilities. And is there a way that we can address and maybe reduce those utility costs and realize some savings? We've engaged Johnson Controls in helping us do that review. And in terms of that review, we looked at our oldest facilities. So we didn't look at Motherville, the Trinity, Father Leduc, because they're new facilities. They're not the ones where we have, where we feel that we may have issues with inefficient energy use, whether it's the type of lighting that's used, whether it's the age of the boilers, all of those mechanical systems. And we talked to Johnson Controls and we engaged with them to help us perform that for two aspects. One is that they bring a wide variety of disciplines to that review process, far more than we have resources in-house to review what we can do for improvements to our facilities for improving our efficiency with regards to energy and utility usage. The other thing that Johnson Controls brings to the table, so why we've engaged for them at this preliminary level, is that they will also provide services with regards to, if you want to carry out a project, procurement, project management, and completion. And then the final thing that they bring to the table with this is what they call a performance guarantee. So that means that they've gone through business, they will go through a business case development on our behalf, working with us in terms of developing that business case and saying, identifying, here's the energy savings that are possible. Here are the energy savings that are essentially would fund any improvements in the cost of those improvements. And we will guarantee those energy savings. And if they aren't realized, they will actually cover that difference. Now, I want to be clear about the performance contract. What they're talking about is the energy savings. So if we're talking about electricity, they guarantee that, for example, we will save 10,000 kilowatt hours of electricity. What they're not guaranteeing is that if right now a kilowatt hour costs us $5, and 5 years from now, that kilowatt hour costs us $7, it's still gonna cost us more for our energy, even though we're consuming less. What they're guaranteeing is that energy savings. So those are the three things that Johnson Controls brought to the table, why we've engaged them. I did look at other firms that provide the engineering background, but not the performance guarantee component of it, and not necessarily the project management component that they do. With regards to the work with Johnson Controls, we have an agreement with them that they will bring it up to a final report level, and at which point we can go our own ways and part company, or we can proceed to the next steps. At this point in time, what I talked to the finance committee is, how do we proceed to those next steps? We have some preliminary estimates of what savings are possible. Those total about $3.6 million in terms of what it would cost to bring improvements to our buildings. But within 20 years, we recover all of those costs, including any costs of any debt or financing that the division chooses to make. With regards to evaluating this with the finance committee, there is other options. One option in terms of funding that, and what Johnson Controls will bring to the table, is helping to achieve a loan through debenture. Debenture is through the government of Alberta. It's a formalized process where the division takes on debt, but it's also a debt at the lowest cost. We can look at borrowing on our own. In the background report, there's a quote out of the borrowing regulation that very specifically allows a jurisdiction to borrow for an energy retrofit. And under that regulation, the key aspect, and this is why we're looking at 20 years at all times, is that it has to have a payback of less than 10 years. Johnson Controls identified other energy savings that could be realized, but they didn't have that payback period of 20 years or less. And so administration is, we're taking that off the table. We're using kind of those areas as information. Perhaps we take them on ourselves in a different fashion. But what we can do right now is look at financing improvements initially that will pay themselves back within a 20-year period. And in the report, it outlines the types of things that would be done: LED lighting upgrades, something called BAS, or building automation systems, which is essentially what controls the temperature, heating. If there's automation with regards to lighting, that might be also included in that. Building envelope, where there's areas where we might, we're doing heat loss because the exterior of the building is not properly sealed. They've also looked at actually our energy contracts, whether there's areas that we could save through our energy contracts by going back to our retailer or provider and saying, we'd like to change the terms of our contracts. I'll tell the board now, when they looked at our gas, our contracts for natural gas, because they are well managed, they don't feel that there's anything that we could do better for natural gas than what we're currently doing. On our electrical side, we're in a long-term contract for electricity. There are aspects of that contract that we can't change, but there are aspects that we can look at and question and see if we can get those modified. And those aspects generally commit us to a certain amount of power consumption. What's not clear is how that is determined. If we don't use that power, they sell it back and we get a credit back, but it's not the same amount of what we're paying for that power that we guaranteed that we purchase. So in the background, we've outlined that those fundable through energy savings. There's energy savings of 16%. What's becoming more predominant as utility taxation has changed is the savings on the greenhouse gas emissions, carbon tax. They feel that there's 18% to be realized there. So when I talked to the finance committee, and we had a representative, Andrew Narty, participate in that portion to answer any questions they have. We looked at debenture debt in order to fund it. We also have the ability to seek other sources of whether it's a lease And it's not like a lease for a vehicle. When we lease something, it's just another form of borrowing, but it's private, so your interest rate generally is higher than what you have on a government-backed debenture. We also have the ability, is that we do part company. We get a nice report that says, here's what you need to do in terms of energy efficiencies, and create our own plan and fund that through our grant funding that we have. And what I reviewed with the finance committee is that grant funding typically is our infrastructure maintenance renewal, or IMR funding, or our capital maintenance renewal funding, or CMR. IMR right now, in terms of how we utilize those expenditures, are very much for reactive expenses. They are not proactive. Something goes wrong with a sink, with a boiler, we're going to IMR for that. We're actually using it a lot for what I would term as general maintenance. If to replace a toilet, we're using our IMR funding for that, because there's not enough room in our operations budget to do that type of work. With regards to CMR, we've submitted a plan for roof replacement and building exteriors of over $6 million. And that's very broad, or very limited when we're talking about the full backlog of deferred maintenance that may exist for our older facilities. So for our CMR, we've identified lots of expenses for it to utilize, and that's barring anything that becomes emergent. If we have an emergent situation, we have a significant roof leak. We had one in St. Ben's a couple of years ago. We had to go in and replace a section of roof that wasn't slated for replacement for a few more years. And it was so significant that there was leakage down into the learning common area, requiring replacement of not only furniture, some of the materials, flooring, and those type of things. So with our CMR money, again, we're being very reactive with it, but it's how we handle those larger expenditures that emerge. So that's what I talked about. But in terms of our grant funding, we can realign, but we have to formulate an expenditure plan. That might be a multi-year expenditure plan. And then the costs become much more fluid. Not only are we evaluating how much in resources we have available, whether we've had to deal with an emergent item, but also now have those cost increases. I'm hoping that this is not our new normal, what we're currently seeing in terms of cost escalation. So Finance Committee understood a couple of things, made a couple of things very clear to me in terms of administration. One is that this is a very general set of parameters. It's $3.6 million. There wasn't a lot of detail in terms of what the financial impact would be on the short term, what it would actually look like in terms of payment, what we would see in savings from the budget to cover the payments for our debenture, wanting to see more information. Also wanted to see like a fuller details in terms of what actually needs to be done in terms of dollars and cents, and I expect that will come in a formal business case. So with those two provisos, though, looking at it as an opportunity, was willing to recommend to the board, and Trustee Miller, tell me if I'm going off the reservation here, that we're interested in doing the work. We're interested in pursuing debenture. What we want is more opportunity to evaluate more detailed information. And so the motion here is to allow two things. One is whether the board has a flavor to pursue debenture borrowing to fund this type of a project. There's no amount listed. It's approval in principle. It's just an indicator to administration that the board is willing to support that pending the details. The other aspect is if we're going for debenture, there are key deadlines for pursuit of debenture. Debenture issuance is handled by the Alberta Capital Financing Corporation. Their next deadline for request to have a debenture issued is October 31st. There are legislative requirements in terms of formulation of a bylaw, in terms of formulation of advertising that needs to be done. If the board does not have a flavor for borrowing by debenture, I need to know that, because then I won't do the work that goes behind that form of financing. So the Finance Committee was saying, yes, it's good. Yes, we'd be interested. Yes, we want to get into the queue. for a debenture, and at any point, we can pull out of that process. So that's, I think, Trustee Miller, is what's before the board is whether you're supportive of the concept in principle. I appreciate $3.6 million is not an insignificant sum. It is something, and I think I'll use your words, not only are we committing the division for, but what are we committing future boards and division for 20 years to? And that's where that additional detail is important. But what we want to do is, yes, we will move this forward, but we want the opportunity, we want to be in the queue that want to be able to evaluate and pull out of that queue if we feel that it's not something that the board can support. So that's why it's before you as an approval. A lot of information, very quickly. And I hope you trust your committee to have gone through it in greater detail. We spent about 2 hours of discussion over it in terms of the formulating the recommendation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Committee Chair, addition to that.
Just to kind of recap, I guess, the options here that, first of all, the committee does support the proposed motion being put forward. And as a reminder that we can cancel anytime, we can take a step back and pause, we can delay, we can stretch out the time period that we're doing it, we can move in another direction at any time. This motion is just so that we can actually start to research further and question and understand further what it might look like in the future moving in this direction. Yeah, and just be assured that the committee is full of questions and looking at this very intensely. So.
Mr. Chair, I was under the impression that this motion was to verify that you wanted to spend the $130,000 on the engineer to tell us what all needs to be done. I thought that's what this motion was about, not to go ahead and say, yes, we want to spend the $3.6 million that we want to go for this. Did I misunderstand?
Yeah, we're already committed to the engineering report from Johnson Controls.
Okay, so that's already in the works. Okay.
Let's move on to that, right? So this is to put us in the queue to the venture, start looking at the bigger picture going forward because of the deadlines. But
Sorry, once we're in the queue, what's the time frame? Sorry if I missed that.
No, so the application has to go into Alberta Financing Corp for October 31st. The issuance of that debenture will be for December 31st, so starting January 1st of 2023. So it's basically done on a quarterly basis. Near the end of each quarter is when that deadline is.
So then, sorry if I can just ask the next question follow-up. So if the amount that we're looking at is 3.59, we all know that costs of everything are going up. Is there a potential that this could now be 4.5? Or is this locked in? Yes, we'll do this with this amount of money.
No, we're not locked in either.
Okay, so if all of a sudden it's $1 million more or something.
That's right. I think that's part of what the detail is, and certainly what the finance committee wanted to see for the details is certainly part of the impetus is to do it quickly so that everything can get locked down. But the flip side is everything's evolving. So when we look at that business case, the other thing when the board goes for a debenture, a business case has to be submitted to the minister as well as approval from the minister for that debenture. And so that business case has to also support whatever borrowing we're doing and that the cost savings are there. So it has to be a very strong document on many levels, including the board's finance committee and the board itself.
so, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Jolene, yeah, your question.
Sorry, one more follow-up question in regards to that. So if the government, let's say we go ahead with this and we go ahead at the 3.59 million, and then let's just say the government comes out with a capital grant funding project that they're providing boards. Can we then apply for that grant and apply it to the loan? I mean, I guess it would depend on the terms of the grant.
It would depend on the terms of the grant, but yes. As long as we weren't already through, it's a matter of what we're planning, what we qualify for. But also then we have an opportunity to look at what we can do in addition. There's $1.7 million of potential savings. If that didn't have a payback of 20 years, we might want to look at something like those as well. The debenture debt is something that allows us time for payment and levels up cash flows for us. And the other thing that comes with this project is that performance guarantee, as well as the project manager.
Trustee Sawaya.
Thank you. I was just going to say, so all along, we've been monitoring our schools, maintaining them as we go along. And
Best
so-
we can.
Yeah, so this 3.6 is going to constitute huge monthly payments for us for the next 20 years. Right?
Yeah, substantial payments, yes.
And I don't know, we're talking about performance guarantee and like Jolene suggested, we're saying 3.6, it could be a lot more too, right? And as I was saying to the committee, Johnson Controls, they're making a lot of money on this. That is their business to make money. So of course it is to their advantage too. So I'm not sure.
So what I can, so we can move, you have a.
Yeah, I just had a question about that performance guarantee. Let's say we retrofit a roof, the oldest building we have, and it only lasts 5 years. Is that covered in the assurance guarantee where it's like, well, we did part of, like, we invested in this, deferred the maintenance and everything, and then it didn't last the 20 years or whatever. You know what I mean?
Well, there's two parts to your question. If I'm wrong, tell me. The first one is that they guarantee the energy savings with equipment that's installed. Now, the equipment might have a life of 10 years or 15 years, let's say 10 years, then we have to go in and replace it. So as long, I'd have to check the details on it. My assumption is, and I have no problem with that, requesting that information, is as long as we put equipment in, the guarantee holds. So, and just with anything else that we do with regards to our facilities, we always have to be responsible for normal wear and tear. So it doesn't change that. Certainly that was brought up at the committee meeting. It doesn't change that we have to still maintain whatever's there. What we're hoping, or what the expectation is we're doing this large capital infusion and we get more life out of that capital infusion as well as energy savings. When we look at something like LED replacement, seems like a natural one. Typically, you have a much longer lifespan on an LED light panel than you do with fluorescent tubes. So, and that's what we talked about, what Johnson Controls talks about, is you have some maintenance cost savings that they can't quantify. Because there's the technology has changed than what's in your buildings.
I'm going to, and I would like us to wrap this, yeah, Mr. Boucher, go ahead.
So Ed, could you just give us kind of the timeline? So if it were approved in principle today by the board, the final business case would be before the board when?
We'd be targeting for September.
September, and then debenture approval would have to happen by December.
Venture approval by the minister has to happen by the end of October.
End of October.
Yeah.
So then the division's budget would first be impacted when? Right then?
In terms of, not until probably the construction was completed. So then we're looking at implementation, tendering, and that happening in springtime, early spring. Hopefully, construction, trades, and all of that is done by September, so we probably wouldn't start seeing savings now until into September 1.
But the debenture expenses would start to, when would we start to pay on the debenture?
I'd have to double check to see what the timeline looks like on that debenture when we've got interest accruing, say from January to September.
Okay. Go ahead, trustee.
Is there a plan of where the money is coming from to pay back this said loan?
Yeah, that's the business case. What it is that the intent is that if we save, by doing all this capital improvement, you save, as I said in my example, 10,000 kilowatt hours per year. That equates to a dollar value that we're no longer spending there, and that pays for the loan.
Okay, and that would cover the entire loan, you think?
That is.
Over
the
20 years.
projection,
Over 20
Over
years.
20 years. In most cases, the payback, the preliminary one that I've seen was that it was paid back in about 18 years.
Thank you.
Trustee Miller, did you answer? No. No, okay. So for me, I know we have some newer buildings in the division and some very old and aging buildings, right? But the question here, proposed before us, is to start moving forward. When we come back with the business plan, the case plan, there's a lot of few details, including ministerial approval and all of that will occur. So at that time, then we can open this wide and then pick at it and see where we commit ourselves or the division to. So to me, right now, good question, good discussion, but this gives you the heads up and start putting your head into that space as to when we come to the bigger picture and there is the case plan, what we need to do and how we commit future goals into that $4 million or $3.6 million. Right. Something you forgot to mention, there will be some guarantees based on the equipment that will be initially storing. We don't have to be on the hook for that, but after that, right? So some of all that, including alternatives and things that will come with some of the products, right? Some could be 5 years, 10 years, we don't know, but all of that will be the whole some discussion at the time. Okay, so if I will have someone make the motion, please. Oh, we had a motion, sorry. Oh, you didn't make the motion? Okay, we'll have someone make the motion and then we'll, okay, go ahead.
Thank you. I move that the board approve in principle the borrowing by debenture to fund capital expenditures to retrofit division schools for energy conservation purposes.
Thank you so much. We've had enough discussion, sorry, Myra. So let's just call the question. We'll call the question, all in favor of moving forward? This is principle. Okay, thank you. That is carried. All right. So like Mr. Boucher said, we have some timelines here, and we'll be working with Johnson to do that. Some of the case. Okay. Committee reports and finances is attached. I know we've talked a lot about this. That was just on Wednesday or Tuesday we met. Monday, yeah, sorry. All right. Any question about the reports? That's what we talked about in the big people. All right. No question, no comments? Okay. Board self-evaluation ad hoc reports. We've talked about this previously, so that it's coming out tomorrow. Any comments or questions? All right. So, Mr. Boucher, we're going into in camera. Who stays?
Administration and trustees, senior administration.
Okay, senior administration. Okay, so I'll have someone made a motion to get us into in camera for litigation issue, and only senior admin stays with